I have made a monorail and built a boat for treasure. Now there's two types of monorails, the one bogey system and the two bogey system. But if I say bogey, then people are gonna laugh and think it's ridiculous. So I'm going to continue by calling it the one cart system and the two cart system. Basically, it's a wheel on top of the track with a bunch of supports, and then a couple extra stuff to couple the wheels together, which you don't need on the one cart system. Also, all of these poles have collisions, and I managed to make it so that one entire side of the cart has no things connecting down, so that you can have all the poles as no collisions. Now, part of this is due to the fact that I've done a bit of weight distribution. So if you didn't know, there's different blocks in this game have different weights. So for example, plastic has almost no weight. Titanium has lots of weight. Okay, I can't make it up this hill, so I'm going to have to turn up the torque. But because of all of the differing weight values, that basically means that you can distribute the weight differently depending on what you're doing. So, what I've done here to make it not fall off, I've brought a bit of weight on the end of the cart itself to make it more balanced. And then on the cab, there's a lot of weight because it's below the main cart, keeping you on the track. So by having this lot of weight, it keeps it a lot more stable. So that's the dual truck design. And then I'm just going to time-lapse the simple design just to show you that both of them work. And it is quite simple and easy to build. Probably the most expensive bit is the track, because if I bring out the trowel tool, this one straight piece that goes almost end to end is about 500 blocks, which is quite a lot of blocks if you just want to build a monorail. I have a couple cost-saving measures, but they're not great because literally the main cost-saving measure is just to make it outlines around the track as opposed to a solid track, which makes it really annoying for building. Anyways, I'm gonna time-lapse the rest of this journey now that I've run out of things to say. Alright, so to build this monorail system, you need loads of blocks to build out the track. Considering that my straight stretch of track cost over 500 blocks, you're going to need a lot of blocks. You also need a bunch of light blocks like plastic or wood for the cut, at least the top bit, and then lots of heavier blocks to go underneath to keep it stable, as well as at least 2 wheels, which are of the old wheel variety, as new wheels probably won't work with the hinges. You need a driver's seat, lots of hinges and cameras. I forgot the cameras earlier on this list, but you do need the cameras because they stabilise it on the track. The hinges allow for free rotation. And then you only on the articulated cart need some springs. And you need trowel tool, scale tool, and screwdriver tool. The trowel tool is really useful in cloning, rotating, and doing other stuff, although you don't technically need it. It will just take a long time if you don't have the trowel. Scale tool, again, you don't technically need it, but you will go insane placing a bunch of blocks really precisely without it. The screwdriver tool, you need it for its unanchoring and wheel speed setting capabilities. So, onto the building segment. So, to build the monorail, I'm going to start by making a backboard, and then change my scale settings to 1, which is the default. I'm then going to pick the block that I'm going to make the track out of. In this case, I'm choosing concrete block. I'm then going to stretch out the block so that this number reads 4, and then the other number reads 4, so you should have 4, 4 and 2. It doesn't matter which numbers are 4, 4 and 2, you just should have 4, 4 and 2. So you want to scale this out, then wherever your track ends, I'd recommend adding a base board so that your monorail car doesn't fly off. But if you want something like a curve, you want a smaller section. So I'm going to create a bigger section to start with. Then I'm going to clone it over. You can just remake this, and then you want a smaller section like this bit. And then you want to create 15-degree turns between smaller sections. And so it should look something like that. And then you want your scale tool on a smaller setting, and then you can drag them inside of each other. And then you just repeat this for however long you want your curve to be. I'm going to go for 90-degree curve. And yeah, so time-lapse time whilst I complete this curve. So now this curve is finished, I'm going to save it, and then I think it would be a good idea to add a slope, because landmass, and also just because I'm making a tutorial, so I need to show you how to make a slope. So if we want to make a slope here, you want to drag the block about halfway through, just because the central rotation point. Rotate it up by 15-degree increments, just like the curve, and then go up. Now you could go up like this, or you can make it go up an even steeper amount. And in which case you want to do this, and then you have nice gradual goings up. And then, yep, so I'm going to level off the top of this curve and be right back with you. So, I've run out of space to build this track, but not to fear, because if you run out of space or just want your track to end, on the end of the piece or top of the piece, create a block, scale it outwards, and then that just stops any carts that you have running off the end, just like what I've constructed on my demonstration track out of gold blocks. So now that you've made your track, make sure you once again save it, and then we'll start to build the actual cart system which goes above the track. So I'll probably release a different tutorial on a different type of monorail cart later, but for now you're going to have the cart that dangles under the track. So about central or here-ish, you want to place a wheel upwards, and then place it upwards again, which will create a big gap between the wheel and the track. That is completely fine. Now remember to place a temporary lever just so that things don't automatically connect up. And then once you have this wheel, we're starting off by building the simple truck system. So once you have this wheel, you want to build a couple wheels along. Although if they're touching like this, sometimes that causes problems when saving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move them ever so slightly apart. I'm just going to actually do that so that they're nice and evenly apart. So once you've got this, you want a hinge there and there, and you can connect blocks like so between the hinges. You can also create blocks like so. It's imperative that these blocks do not touch the wheels, or that could stop them rotating. Right, so now we have this. on this side, I'm going to create a backboard that goes out a little bit, like so, then drags down by a bit. And I'm going to make it like this, so there's a bit of a gap there, about half a stud. And then you want another hinge like that, and a hinge like that. And those hinges will house cameras. I would actually recommend making them a bit closer together. Then also probably scale the backboard to eliminate any Z-fighting that happens. Right, on the end of these hinges, you want to place your cameras. These cameras just guide it around the corners. And so we probably also want to make this same thing on the other side. So I am going to clone this over and probably time-lapse what I'm doing. Right, so I prefer this side because it's not touching the track, and that just tells me that it's not going to glue to the track. Because whenever you load parts, they automatically glue together if they're too close. And so I'm just going to move this bit away from the track slightly so it doesn't touch it. Okay, and now we have this nice and even. Now on one of the sides, just so that it doesn't fall off the other side, the side that you build this on, which is just a nice weight to keep it centered, so that should just hook it onto this side. The other side is where you're going to build the point at which the cart dangles from. So a hinge out, and then a block on the hinge, scale however you want it, and then go down however much you want. This is going to connect to the roof of the cabin. And then, pop, we have a hinge like that, and now we build the monorail cabin. So I'm just going to cut, and I'll have the cabin. Right, so I have a basic cart constructed, and right, anything that's not connected to the temporary lever will now connect to the seat. And if you have connect tool, then you can just connect it up, but if you don't have connect tool, delete the lever, then place the seat. So forwards, I'm just going to keep as normal input, backwards, keep as normal input. Right, so now is the time that we can save and then reload, because it might not have saved properly. And there is a difference between when you build something and when you save and then reload it, in that when you save and reload it actually glues stuff together, so sometimes it can break if you don't do that. So now we have it reloaded, we can select it, anchored off, and I would recommend turning the torque up. So, right, here's something that you need to change with the screwdriver tool. The wheels are way too fast to start with. So you want to go in and set the speed to something sensible, like 5 or 10. Right, so you can see the cabin is swinging, which is why we've got the hinges there. It's swinging more than I'd expect. And it should be able to make it up this uphill quite nicely, which is also part of the reason we have the hinges there. Okay, and it makes it to the end of the track. So, now what we can do is we can either just walk back or take the monorail back, and then I'm going to build the two-cart design. The two-cart design is more useful if you want passengers, but you can make the one-cart design contain passengers as well. Right, so I've just reloaded, and right, now let's get to work on the 2 bogie setup. It's extremely similar to the one cart setup, at least to start off with, because you have your wheel that you want to place upwards like this, and you also need to remember to place your temporary lever, which will connect up to stuff, but that's kind of the point of it. So you then want your hinge. Now there are technically 2 ways of doing this. You could double up the wheels, or you could just have single wheels. If you double up the wheels, it also allows you to articulate up and down, but just for simplicity and for this tutorial, I'm not going to build that right now, at least. Okay, so once you've got your 1 wheel in place, it should have, yeah, it should look like this. Remember to slow it down and turn the torque up. So, kind of similar to the 1 cart setup, you need to add a backboard with cameras attached to the bottom, but the cameras are going to be closer together intentionally because it can go around corners a lot easier as this setup. So what have I got it as? I've got half, 5.5 and 5, so I'm going to remember that. Half, 5, and then 5.5. However, that does go into the floor, so I'm just going to create a gap like this and replace the block there like so. So you should have this. So now you grab your hinge, place it facing downwards like so, and then place cameras on the end. Then once you've got cameras on the end like so, then you're going to have to clone this over. Now, right, you should have it cloned over like so. And to make sure that it can articulate properly, what we're going to do is a couple blocks out the back here so that you can mount some hinges to them to allow it to rotate nice and freely. And then once you do that, you want to place hinges facing upwards and then something connecting between them. I think my bar place was built slightly differently between the 2. So you want to make sure your bar is nice and even so that they actually stay in line like so. I've still built it at different heights, but it will still work. But I'm still going to fix it though, because it's not meant to be built like that. Okay, so now you have something that should look a bit like this. What you'll want to do is, I mean, this is kind of the optional bit, but it's quite useful. You want on the edges of the bar 2 more hinges with springs placed in between like so. So you should have something that looks like that. And then also coming off of this bar, you want a hinge rotating like that. And then blocks can go in between the connection point of springs without colliding with the springs, which is really useful. And yeah, right, so we should be in a position to build the cart. So I'm going to cut and duplicate over the other cart that I've already prepared. Okay, so I've built my cab here, which is a clone of this cab here. So now what I'm going to do is delete the temporary lever and then hook up the wheels. keeping forwards as my forwards input and backwards as my regular backwards input. Now we can save, reload and test. This should all be working now, and right, it should articulate nice and freely. Just realise that the design for having multiple wheels, all you would have to do is take the current setup, then just duplicate the wheel across slightly, and then it will create a bulkier setup, but it should still work. So that is the 2-bit setup. So we can unanchor it, great, it all sits on the track nicely. It's at a reasonable speed because I remembered to set it to 1 this time. Seems I set my cameras too low as they're like below the track, which is something you have to account for because unanchoring will make it sit low. Also forgot the weights on the sides, but it does seem to be running fine, probably due to the fact that the cab is low down and is really heavy. And there's a hinge missing from the cab, which gives it this really weird swinging motion. But if you don't mind it swinging this weirdly, then you can keep it, but otherwise you will want a hinge connecting the cab to the rest of the vehicle. So I'm pretty sure that is it with this tutorial. Please like the video so more people see it, subscribe, and also join the Discord server. Link in the description of this video and all my other videos. As well as that, if you enjoyed this monorail tutorial, I think you'd enjoy my roller coaster or train tutorial, which there might have been iCards for during the video. And with that said, goodbye.